first, I want to thank Jason Martinson for joining us. He's been teaching with Animation Mentor now for 12 years, which is amazing. He's worked on tons of amazing films, Ferdinand, Storks, Hotel Transylvania, 1 and 2, I believe. One of my favorite modern animated films, Cloudy with the Chance of Meatballs 2. Study that film and study the animation in that film. It's amazing how far they push those poses and exaggerations. It's really great. So today, Jason is going to be doing a workflow demonstration for us. As he describes it, this workflow demonstration is really geared for and good for beginner to intermediate students. So he's going to take us through his process. It'll be like a bit of a cooking show. He's going to jump forward in certain areas, but you'll get a sense of what his workflow is like. And I think that's about it for my intro, and I'll hand it over to you, Jason.
All right, so you're going to be able to ask more questions. I'm going to be working and talking, and I'll periodically check. So if there's an important question that you guys somebody has not understood very clearly, or I'm not making sense on something, please type it in capital letters, and that way somebody with a voice here, that's not me, can say, hey Jason, there's a question that's regarding your actual demo. If it's a question that's more related to just animation in general or something I've worked on in the past, we can save it for the last 15 minutes. All right, so I'm just going to show you a process of my workflow for a body mechanics shot. And this is something I did a few years ago, and I've demoed for a few of my students. I teach all the different classes in Animation Mentor. I teach bouncing ball all the way to the creatures class. Right now I'm teaching body mechanics 2, and I think next term I'm going to be teaching intermediate or advanced acting. I can't remember which one I'm going to be teaching. But I bounce around just because it's fun for me to teach the different levels. Okay, so the first thing I do when I'm going to do a body mechanics assignment, and this would be something that you could do at Animation Mentor, is I film reference or find reference on the internet, and I make it in an achievable timeline. This is only 3 seconds. Obviously, you guys can do a bit longer when you have like a long chunk of time, 4 or 5 weeks. And this is the original reference here. I'm just going to make this a little bigger. And this is me at my parents' house a couple summers ago out by the log pile. We live out in the woods. And I picked up this, I don't even know what this is. It's a tool my dad has for banging logs around. Because I wanted to have a weight, heavy weight object and then some sort of fun mechanic. So this is the original video reference here. And hopefully you guys are getting a decent playback. And what I would do after I took that and I took this clip and I'm like, okay, that's what I'm going to use, is I would bring it into QuickTime or some video editing program, and this is QuickTime, and then I like to retime it. I like to say, well, I'm going to add some frames around here, around this hang time. I'm going to take some frames away around here where I swing through so I get a faster swing. So I'm retiming, I'm animating already before I've even gotten into Maya. You don't always have to do this. This is just a trick I like to teach my students. It's fun if you're going to bring your clip directly into Maya, because a lot of times, I would say 3/4 of the time, I animate with my clip reference outside of Maya, but sometimes I bring it right into Maya. And when I bring it into Maya, it's because I want to use it much more accurately. And if I have the timing wrong, it's not that useful. So I try to get the timing more what I want. So I retime this, and that's what this is here. This is an image plane in Maya. And I'm sure there's tutorials online. I don't want to go into that how you can bring your image plane in. And there's actually a way with your image plane where you can retime it as well in Maya. So you can see here, this is the timing of the frames. And as I frame forward, you'll see the frames changing here. It's 4, 5, 6, 7. Sometimes it's not moving because I have this on 2s. I like to have sometimes my reference and body mechanics on 2s, so there's less information. So I can really just get the pure poses. And you can see here that if I move this around, it changes the timing of what frame it's on. So there's a point in the middle here where I slowed down the timing. If you look in the graph editor here, those who are familiar with the graph editor, very important. And then it goes back to its normal time, because I actually had already edited this outside of, this is just a readjustment of time. So this is my scene in Maya, and that's the timing I want. So you can see it feels a little bit more stylized. And then I created a temporary set. So it's just basically a room with a door. just 4 cubes. And then I brought in Stewart. So I was going to do this all with Stewart. And this is my perspective window, so you can go around. But then I picked a camera angle that I wanted. So this I would lock, and I would always refer to this for my posing. But I would sometimes pose within this 3D window. You can see when I turn NURBS curves on, I can move the stuff around. But I'm actually animating with the MG picker, which is an Animation Mentor picker tool we use. It's actually available online, I think, for anybody to use. But Animation Mentor has a bunch of the characters saved out, so you can select things on the character without having to have NURBS curve turned on, which makes your scene a little less dirty. So it's really nice. And you can see that has like the FK, IK switching and all the nice options. So I'll be using that. So you won't actually see the controls I'm selecting very often, just so you guys know. Now, the next thing I would do before animating the scene is set up what I need. So in this case, I'm going to need to have this character pick up this object, right? So this is an object I made with cylinders in Maya, and I think that's a torus. Just simple polygons. And I constrained it into one piece. It's just 2 or 3 pieces or whatever. And then I created some locators. And the reason I created locators is because I thought about it for a minute. The best way to animate this and make it simple for myself was to use locators. If I was animating him walking over and picking up a cup or a sword or a gun, something small that he can easily lift with one hand, I'm not going to switch hands around. I might not create a lot of locators. I might not need to. I could just create a constraint between the objects, especially if I'm not going to spin the gun. I'm just going to hold it in one pose. But in this case, I'm going to be moving the hands around, this beam, and the object itself, even though I'm going to be lifting it, I don't want the hands to drive it, because really, if you think about it, when you lift a heavy object, let's say I'm going to lift a big, say a big suitcase, like this is a big suitcase or something huge. If I'm going to lift this, even though I'm holding it with my hands, this is Ori and Naru, for those who are fans of Ori and the Will of the Wisps. I got this for the Blind Forest. I worked on the sequel. A nice gift. If I'm going to actually move this heavy object around, let's say this weighed like 50, 60 pounds, my hands are not strong enough. I have to kind of hold it with my hips, right? Or if I was carrying this as a log, I'm kind of holding it with my shoulder. My hand's resting on it. Let me tilt this back up. But as you can see, I can kind of take my hand off it. I'm pretending this is really heavy. And it's really being rested on by my shoulder, my chest area. So it makes a lot more sense for me to constrain this to the shoulder or the chest, because that's what's driving it, right? My hand is connected to it, but it's not driving. So I thought about that when I set up the scene, and I decided what I wanted to do is have this object being driven by my chest, because once I lifted it, all this swinging was happening from my chest. So my hands were going to follow this object, and the object was going to follow my chest. And because I set it up this way, it made my animation a lot easier. So what I did was created 3 locators. You have a locator here, and it's called off. So there's 4 locators going through my setup here. This is a good thing to learn for people that don't understand constraints. And this moves the whole object around until a point. At a point, he's going to pick up this object. And now you can see this locator doesn't move anything because I've switched the constraint to another locator. That locator is called chest offset locator. So now, as of this frame, nothing's moving on this, but as of this frame, now this is moving. And this is driven by his, I'm animating him FK, by his FK chest. So if I rotate his chest, let me select all these controls, and spine around, it moves with it. So you can swing this, right? So basically it's parented, the locator is parented to the chest, but it's not locked to it. I can animate it. I can put keys on it so I can move it wherever I want. And then on top of that, you have these locators. So until his hand is on the object, I actually just, for simplicity's sake, and I like FK, left his arms in FK. But at a certain point, I decided he wants to hold the object. So here his hand's still in FK, and here it's now in IK. And I can't actually animate his IK hands, but what I can animate is this locator that his hand is constrained to. So this locator is parented to this object. So now if I want to, I can move it around and slide his hands around. But it's still being driven by this object, which is also being driven by his chest. This setup took maybe half an hour to prepare and saved me many hours of work later on. And it was only because I thought about it beforehand. I thought about what's the driving force, and it would be just like if you were doing anything in real life. What is the driving force of you carrying this object? That is the object you want to constrain it to. If I was going to switch it from my hips to my shoulder, I would have two locators, one for the shoulder, one for the hips. And at some point in between, I would switch those constraints. So hopefully that briefly explains my setup here.